Hey, friends, and welcome to the Deep Stack Podcast. I'm your host, Raph.
I'm your host, Leo.
This is the Deep Stack Podcast, where we explore everything in modern and not so modern application stacks. Today, we're going to be breaking down Leo's old project, Nounly. So, Leo, do you want to tell us about Nounly?
Yeah, it's a fun little project that I started while I was working at Microsoft a decade ago, and
Nice.
it started in this was 2000, actually more than a decade ago, like 2011, and Microsoft had entered with Azure the cloud space, and so there was a hackathon to come up with cloud projects, and so Nounly is the project that I built in that hackathon. And I kept building on after leaving Microsoft. Actually, it started as stinkybad.com, and I think the URL still
Excellent
works.
name.
Well, why it was funny was Nounly was a website, or is a website. It's a URL shortener, but it uses nouns instead of like weird codes, right? So Bitly and a tiny URL were very big back then, or maybe still are. And I found them frustrating to share URLs with people in real life. They're unusable, right? Because you get a code with like 8QPR capital 7, so it doesn't work. And so
Yeah.
I had this idea of using Nounly or nouns, using nouns. And because it was nouns, I took a domain name that was like an adjective. So everything was kind of funny. You ended up with stinky bad chair, stinky bad horse, stinky bad, a noun.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I built that, and I built it on a very early Azure, right? The 2011 kind of Azure. Interestingly, Azure was one of the first that provided platform as a service before they even had
Huh.
infrastructure as a service. You didn't even have VMs yet, and so it ended up being like a Azure website. I think it was called. It was running on
I
IIS.
vaguely remember that, that term.
It was kind of fun. I thought the experience was cool. You had the command line. You started a new Azure website project, and there was like a dash git that would give you like a git initted folder, and as well as a remote repo. And then any git push that you did, they had their builder that I forgot what it's called, like something with a K, that would look at your files and then figure out whether it was like a Python or a C#. I think the first version I built was C#. And then it would build it and push it and host it. And that experience to go from, using the command line to get an empty folder and then git commit, git push, and it was up and running. I think everybody was still catching up to that behavior, to that dev experience. So I really liked it. Of
That's
course, it
awesome.
was very Microsofty, like it was like C#, only IIS, no Linux containers.
Yeah.
So that was the first version of Stinky Bad. But then when I left Microsoft, that's when I started using like more open source tools. So
Yeah.
I rewrote the app in D.lang. That was like the thing, the
Never
language
heard of
that I
that.
used for my hobby projects. And so I wanted to use that. I started using instead of course, D.lang. If you push D codes to the Azure websites, I didn't know what to do with it. So I had to build my own image. But then by that time, Azure websites had Docker support. So you could actually, it could host containers as well as raw
What
raw
year was that?
files. Sorry?
What year was that they started to support Docker containers?
Oh, I don't know, maybe 16 or something, 2016.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't
Right.
remember. That was much later. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I was surprised. I was like, wait, the timeline. I thought it was just like maybe a few years after, and I was like, that's impressive that they
Well,
were that early on the container
one,
train.
so that particular feature with Docker containers got renamed a bunch of times.
Okay.
Now even now, I think it's called Azure Websites for Docker or something.
Okay.
I don't
Of
keep up with
course.
the naming,
Yeah.
but yeah. So that the whole stack from Stinky Bad,
Yeah.
has been completely rewritten around that time, like maybe 5, 6, or 2016-ish. So
Okay.
that's when I also got the domain name Nounly, noun.ly. Actually, that was a
Nice.
little earlier, I think, maybe 2015, to be honest. Because people liked it, people started using it. Stinky Bad, I got like a bunch of emails from users that said, "Hey, I want to use Stinky Bad on my presentation, but I cannot show stinkybad.com on at work, So
That's
is there a
funny.
way I can have a different domain name?"
Yeah.
And actually, presentations was the perfect use case because URLs in a presentation are pretty much pointless because people can't get it and they'll have to wait until you mail if you mail them the deck.
Yeah.
Um, and so around that same time, I got the domain noun.ly as well as nounly.com. And I added code generator so that on your slide, you could put both the noun as well as the QR code, which
Awesome.
because the nouns are short, the QR code kind of had didn't require very high resolution, right? Because you didn't have a lot of bits to put in there.
Yeah.
Um, so at that time, well, now old, but the new stack was built, right? So the backend was rewritten in D.lang using D's Vibe web framework, which
Okay.
back then was state of the art. It was like asynchronous, all the good stuff, coroutines, all the stuff that the new modern web frameworks in Node.js, Python, Rust, they all use that same kind of architecture. Right now, Vibe is very dated. But yeah, so that's what it's using
Oh
now. So
yeah.
if you go to noun.ly, that's what it's using. It's using the Vibe at the backend. It's not using any front end framework. Everything is like pretty raw, handwritten JavaScript and CSS. I think it was using what's the Twitter CSS framework called again?
Oh, Bootstrap.
I guess so. Yeah, Bootstrap. I think it was using Bootstrap. I kind of forgot because I haven't touched it in a long time.
You know what I love? So I just went to the website. I like that you have a little beta banner on the
The
top
perpetual
left.
beta I got from Google. So that's like a disclaimer.
It's a 12-year-old beta.
12-year-old beta.
Yeah,
So so talk about deep stack, right? So front end is handwritten HTML with CSS, no
that's
jQuery.
called that artisanal HTML
Oh
now.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly. Um, which, to be honest, for that kind of single page app, I really think I don't need I don't need a framework, right?
I agree.
The jQuery's biggest feature, the $sign, I
Yeah.
just built as a one liner, and so to reference elements, I use that same kind of style.
Yeah.
Um, I also and so there's only one REST call. Basically, you can create a noun and you can dereference a noun. So that's pretty much it. I also built two native apps for iOS and Android. In similar fashion, I didn't use any framework for those.
Are they still up on the app stores?
They should be there,
All right.
uh,
Cool.
but honestly, I need to revamp them. I wonder if they still work because as the
Oh,
plenty of times the operating system get revamped, and if you do not recompile and re-upload your app, they'll just don't make it show up on the newer devices, and so it's possible that
yeah.
uh,
It's
it's not
no
required.
longer listed.
It could be, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Gone.
So I didn't use a framework for the native apps,
Yeah.
partly because that is kind of how I learn things, and same as not using jQuery and using JavaScript and writing CSS and HTML. If you don't know the pain points of doing that,
Hmm.
I don't think you'll know the value that frameworks provide or which framework even to go for, because
That's fair.
you want to address that pain. And if maybe the pain isn't even there, like in the case of front end for Nowly, honestly, there's no pain in using JavaScript and XML HTTP, there was no fetch API, right? So the XML HTTP request to talk to a backend, honestly, it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
Incidentally, my team in Microsoft was in charge of XML HTTP requests. So I did not have a problem with XML HTTP requests.
Yep.
One of my first tasks joining that team was actually uh, XML HTTP requests had been added to Microsoft Internet Explorer by the Office team.
Okay.
It became a standard afterwards. And then people started complaining that Microsoft browser didn't support the standard. So my first task was to change XML HTTP requests in Internet Explorer to follow the standard. So that was kind of a fun task. So for me to use XML HTTP request was not a big issue. If you know the quirks, it was never intended as a beautiful API for external use. It just became the beginning of Ajax, right? Um,
Yeah.
so that was the front end. And again, doing that handwritten full circle loop really makes you appreciate when to use a framework, what framework to use, which parts to use it for, instead of
Yeah.
it blindly using every feature available, right? And so the same for the native apps. This is again a one-page application. I didn't feel the need to use
Objectives
like
in Java.
so I think I used Kotlin on Android,
Okay.
and I used Swift on iOS.
Yeah.
And here's my biggest takeaway from this project was that once you design your model view model, right? Your model view controller, the new model view model MVVM architecture. Once you design that architecture, it's the same for both apps.
Yeah.
And so defining what your model look like, what your model view looks like, what your views look like, that is 80% of the job. Then translating that twice, once into Swift and once into Kotlin,
Not a
is
big
really
deal.
negligible. Like
Yeah.
it's like that. I always say, like, in our profession, typing is the least of my worry. Like designing something like good architecture and a stable, resilient architecture. That is the hard part, right? So
So what you're
you need to
saying is
type it.
ChatGPT is not taking our jobs just yet.
Well, unless they get into the designing part.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So typing the same architecture twice, once in Kotlin, once in Swift, no problem at all. In fact, both apps are open source. And if you look at them, it's kind of funny. All the files and the folders have the same name. It's just one is written for iOS and the other one is written in Kotlin. And then there's, of course, there's 20% is different in the operating system. Yeah, once you get to storage, for example, they all have their own way of doing local preferences, local store, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Their fetch API, the HTTP API is a little different.
Yeah.
But honestly, you write small, thin abstractions, and then the rest of your app looks the same. And it's beautiful because you end up with the same bugs in both, and you fix them in both. As opposed to if you use two web frameworks, if you use
Yep.
an iOS framework or like one of those phone gap things,
Yeah.
I'm not a fan. You get they have their own quirks, and now you're one step further away from the source of the problem. And I find debugging a higher level problem always harder than debugging a low level one.
Yeah. I can
Um,
see that. I will in a future episode, perhaps I will push back on a little bit of that. But
yeah, I know exactly when to appreciate those
yeah.
frameworks
Yeah.
after having doing the manual work.
Yep.
So we're going through the stack, right? We have artisanal HTML, JavaScript, CSS,
Yep.
to native apps, Kotlin and Swift. A REST API, very straightforward REST API with just CRUD on nouns, basically. You can post, you get a noun, you can delete that noun, you can get it to dereference the noun.
What database are you using?
Yeah, okay, that is still Azure Table, actually. So I wanted to, in that new world of cloud, they had introduced Azure Blob Store, Azure Table Store, and there was a third one. the very early storage services, or Azure Q. Yeah, those were the first 3 high-level storage services that Azure provided back in the early tens. And so I used Azure Table,
Okay.
which is kind of like a precursor to Dynamo, right? Dynamo might have been
Interesting.
around actually because Azure was really catching up on Amazon in the early cloud years.
Yeah.
But Azure Table was perfect because I have this key value kind of behavior, and the key is the nouns,
Wait, but so
noun or nouns.
you had this back in 2011?
Right. Yep. So I was using Azure Table. I am still using Azure Table as a key value store.
Yeah.
Um, so as Stinky Bad and Noun, they got more popular, I ran out of nouns. And so the nouns became limited in time. So after 24 hours, your link might no longer be valid because there's like a
Yeah.
lazy garbage collection that's happening. And what
Okay.
you can get, and as nouns are taken, you end up with more nouns. So instead
Okay.
of Stinky Bad Chair, you would end up with Stinky Bad Horse Chair, right? And it
Okay.
still was fun.
Yeah.
Oftentimes you end up with very fun combinations.
Yeah.
Um, and key value store was perfect, right? You have a key, and the value becomes the URL that is being dereferenced, but plus a bunch of metadata. Interestingly, as soon as the site was up and running, I got a shitload of spam
Of
because all of
course.
these bots, anytime they see a edit box, they just
Yeah.
put links in it, right? You get like a lot of spam. So so in the backend, I think 60% of the backend code is anti-spam. So
Of
I do
course.
like I do like a honeypot in the HTML form, right? So
Yeah.
that means like a bogus field with like
Yeah.
a display none CSS class
Yep.
that if bots put something in there,
Yeah.
then you know it's a bot. I reference 2 external honeypots. So there is the honeypot project. Actually, that was Cloudflare's first project. Cloudflare's, before it was called Cloudflare, there was
Yeah.
honeypot, project.org, I think, where people would volunteer to put a piece of form on their website that the honeypot, so the early Cloudflare would use to detect bots and keep a blacklist of these bots, of these IP addresses that these bots were using. And
That's
so that
awesome.
was called a RBL, I think. RBL stood for request block list or something. I forgot what the R stood for.
Yeah.
Um, and there's another one, spamhouse.org. So both of these have public RBLs. And these RBLs, you can query them using DNS. It's actually kind of funny, an API designed on DNS. So to query these databases, you would craft a DNS request. So you would ask, what is the IP for this domain? But that
Yeah.
domain was not a real domain, right? So you basically the IP address that you want to query, uh, you prepend it to their RBL domain. So I think it was like rbl.spamhouse.org and rbl.projecthoneypot.org. And so you prepend the IP address, and then it would return an IP address. If it says not found, like, an X domain, IP not, or domain address not found, then
Yeah.
it was not in the list. If it returns an IP address, then that IP address, it's not a real IP address. In fact, it would always be localhost, always do
Okay.
127.00x. And then the
Yeah.
last digit of the IP address actually tells you some metadata about, why it was blocked.
Okay. I
It's
feel
kind of
like I
funny.
vaguely remember coming across this many years ago.
It's kind of funny.
Yeah.
And so I did that. I did the form honeypot, 2 RBL queries, and then there's a little bit of because my Nowly doesn't have a login, so it doesn't have an idea of a session,
Yeah.
and I didn't want to get into that. That is like a rabbit hole I didn't want to get into.
Yeah.
Um, so to prevent spam, I did kind of proof of work. So so the Nowly JavaScript, when you post,
Yeah.
the JavaScript calculates a bunch of hashes with the current time, uh, and a salt that keeps changing until that hash ends in a bunch of zeros. It's kind of like how the early, well, so how Bitcoin, but also the early cash hash. So cache hash was an anti-spam pre Bitcoin, right?
Okay.
Anti-spam mechanism.
Yeah.
And so inspired by cache hash, the website, when you do a post on Nounly form, it does a bunch of these iterations until it has a hash with a bunch of zeros, and then it's very quickly to test backend whether there's zeros in the hash. So using these, that's why I mean 60% is anti-spam in the backend because of
Yeah.
the actual key value is very simple.
Wild.
Uh,
That's cool.
yeah, so the storage is just key value store.
Yep.
It can honestly, it can be any key value store because I'm not using any fanciness. The only fancy feature, it's not fancy anymore because now every store provides it. The only the only fanciness is the optimistic locking, right? So if you have multiple customers going to the website, multiple
Yeah.
users going to the website, and they, because of the algorithm is deterministic when it returns a noun for a URL.
Mhm.
Um, um, it's not random.
Okay.
And so there's a risk that both would get the same noun. And so how do you prevent this kind of concurrency? And I'm using optimistic locking. Optimistic locking boils down to every record keeping track of a version. And when that record is updated, so for, and in the nounly case, the key is the noun or nouns that you're about to get, right? So when
Yeah.
a record gets updated, it has to provide the version that it's of the record that it's updating. So if somebody wins the race, then your version would no longer match, and there's an iteration loop a second time where it picks another noun, and it would try again until your browser wins the race, and you get the nouns displayed in your browser window. So optimistic locking is how you avoid like locking database tables, locking records, all this kind of locking, which is, if you do not unlock, you can get into a deadlock, you can get into a lock that has to expire before somebody can do something. So locking to me is something to be avoided.
Yeah.
Uh, and now a lot of these key value stores, right? Redis, Nats, Dynamo, they all have this
They'll do
optimistic
it.
locking as a pattern.
Yeah. So
Um, so, and then the last thing, I was around the same time, I got to know Nix. So the Nix package manager. I've been using macOS, but with the Nix package manager, and the Nix package manager uh, can build Docker images. And it's kind of cool because if you use Nix to build a Docker image, the Docker image will contain only stuff that is referenceable, right? The way Nix works, everything has a hash based on the sources that were used to generate. And
okay.
so when you start with your binary, which is my Nounly D language binary,
Yep.
it basically scans that binary. And if there's a hash to TZ data, TZ data will be pulled in. If there's a hash to glibc, which there probably isn't because it was using D.lang, but it would pull that in, right? So
Yeah.
everything, because of this tree of hashing, it would only pull in stuff that is actively being referenced by that binary, the final binary. So you end up with very small Docker images from scratch, basically the equivalent as writing your own from scratch and copying only the stuff that you would need.
Yeah.
So that was kind of cool. Not only really let me experiment with all these utilities,
Mhm.
but yeah, it's an old website. The apps might have been delisted, so it needs some love, and I probably need to
Yeah.
spend some time to revamp it.
So how are you gonna do that?
That's a good question. Like, I probably wouldn't use D.lang anymore.
No?
Not because of the language. I think the language is still being actively developed, getting new
That's
features.
cool.
D.lang is not well known, but
Yeah.
it's a lot of the features make it into the other languages. Like Rust has features that started in D.lang.
Awesome.
The new C++ has features that started in D.lang.
That is
So I
cool.
really feel it's kind of fun having followed that language and the design and the discussions behind the features that are being added.
Yeah.
It taught me a lot. It's just that 5D, the web framework, is really old right now.
Mm. Yeah, their
And
website
I'm
looks a little dated.
Yeah, it's very dated. I don't think there's a new modern alternative. So I would probably use like Go or TypeScript.
Hey, the
to rewrite it.
latest commit to Vibe D was 8 hours ago, so
Well,
actively maintained. I don't know how
sure.
actively.
Yeah, I think it is being maintained. Yeah, but I wonder how much of those are just fixing breakage happening by the compiler. The compiler features are being added.
Yeah. It
Yeah.
still hasn't gotten to a version 1. It's still at 0.9.6.
There you go. Yeah,
Yeah.
not great. So I wouldn't use Azure Table probably as another one of those things that I don't think it got any features. In fact, I considering the size of my data set, it's not big, right?
Yeah.
Because the nouns expire after 24 hours, the number of keys that I have to keep in memory is pretty constant, doesn't change much. It's not very big. I could probably keep the whole thing in memory. Of course, I cannot use local memory, right? As I have multiple instances of my backend up and running.
Yeah.
They need like a consistent memory a consistent store.
Yeah.
But I could probably do it in Redis or NATS. So I would use either one of those two. Perfect in-memory databases. I don't need persistence. Like what is the worst that can happen if I lose all my instances and all the keys and the values are gone?
Mhm.
Like only the active nouns would have been affected, and which are not that many. So
Yeah.
that's probably the better architecture as opposed to doing like a round trip to a persistent database like Azure Table, right? It's a little bit overkill.
Yeah.
Um,
But
yeah,
you wouldn't switch to a full blown front end framework with
I could be tempted. Actually, I would be tempted to.
Yeah?
Um,
What would be the value there?
so,
Just for fun, or would there be some
um,
value?
yeah,
I
maybe just for fun to
mean,
like,
fun is valuable.
to me, a project like Nounly is perfect ground to experiments with, right? Like,
Yeah.
what would it look like using Vue? What would it look like using React? How do you compare? Like, how do you quantify the costs and the value of these frameworks?
Yeah. Yeah.
But um, the one that I personally haven't used yet, but would love to try, and maybe now only would be a occasion to try it, is Kit. So
Yeah.
maybe I would try that for Nounly 2.0, get
It
it out of
does.
beta.
Yeah. Finally remove that little flag.
So yeah,
Awesome.
it's a fun little project. I still use it in my presentations. It has some usage. I mean, I'm not marketing it. If people like it, let me know. If people think if it doesn't work, let me know. If there's a feature you would like to see, let me know. It's quite fun for me to iterate on.
That's noun.ly, right? Noun.ly. Awesome.
So a little Easter egg.
Yeah.
If you go to noun mom, M-O-M, it goes to a Fiverr video that one of my friends got me when I launched Stinky Bad. And so it still references Stinky Bad, but it's hilarious. Like maybe I should ask the same guy to do a new one.
Yeah.
So
Oops, that's my camera deciding it has been half an hour. Alrighty, thanks for listening. We are building projects that should make it a lot easier for developers to build projects like Nounly.
yeah, check out D.lang.io, which is making building web apps cheaper, easier, and more resilient.
And check out the Chewy Stack at gochewy.io, a deep stack framework that helps developers build better products faster. That's defang, defang.io, and gochewy.io, gochewy.io. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.
See ya.